Good morning. It is Monday, December 28th, 2015. This is your morning edition on I-24 News. Coming up later today, speaking on the one-week anniversary to the assassination of Hezbollah terrorist Samir Quntar, the group's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, threatens the inevitable retaliation against Israel, whom he blames for the attack. Israeli ministers pass a contentious bill to out foreign-funded NGOs. And later on the show, another shock artists. When art breaks the law, or does it? We'll take a closer look. Good morning, I'm Yael Lavie, and we begin here in the Middle East, where Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah threatened the inevitable retaliation against Israel for killing one of his group's members in Syria last week. In a lengthy, as always, televised address marking a week since the death of terrorist leader Samir Quntar, Nasrallah vowed the Lebanon-based group would respond to the killing regardless of the repercussions, and that Israelis have reason to worry, both within Israel and along the border. Nasrallah's threats came a day after a similar message was voiced by another Islamist leader. In a recorded message released Saturday, ISIS chief Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi threatened attacks against Israel, saying that Israel will pay a heavy price, to quote him, and that ISIS will soon be heard in Palestine. Though military analysts believe Hezbollah has its hands full in Syria, fighting in support of President Bashar al-Assad's regime, the group has been known to honor its pledges of vengeance, if not locally, then internationally. That said, all of this comes on the heels of Syria, of supposedly a detente or a ceasefire and negotiations that are supposed to start between the government there and factions at the end of January. And those negotiations make all the players on the chessboard that is the Middle East put out rhetoric, one may say. Let's take a look at a report on the latest from the busy Syrian front and the rhetoric of threats regionally, then break it down.
After the UN Security Council passed a resolution on launching negotiations between Syria and President Bashar al-Assad's regime and opposition leaders, Russia's determination to solve the Syrian crisis seems to be stepping up as well. According to the Israeli daily Haaretz, Moscow's special envoy to Syria was sent to a secret Middle Eastern tour to discuss the next phases of the international efforts to end Syria's civil war. The Russian envoy Alexander Lavrentiev, which took office only a few weeks ago after being personally appointed by Russian President Vladimir Putin, began his whirlwind tour last week in Baghdad. From there, he traveled to Amman just before arriving in Jerusalem on Thursday. On Friday, he was already on his way to Egypt, as on Saturday, he met with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi himself. His visit ends with meetings with senior United Arab Emirates officials in Abu Dhabi. The tour, however, did not include Saudi Arabia. According to Western diplomats cited in the report, the Russian envoy was originally planned to visit Riyadh as well, but a change in plans likely occurred due to the killing of Zaran al-Lush, the leader of the Jaffa Islam organization, which is strongly supported by the Saudis, in an alleged Russian airstrike over the weekend.
Since the first day, we have never hid. We have shown where we walk, where we bomb, how we bomb, and what the results are.
On Sunday, the rebel group revealed the identity of its new leader.
We want to assure our beloved people that we are following our late leader Zaran al-Lush's path to achieve the goal he set out for us.
Another organization which is stuck in the deep Syrian mud is the Lebanese Hezbollah group, which now has to fight not only in the Syrian front, but on the Israeli one as well.
The Israelis are hiding like rats along the border. They are worried, and they should be worried along the border and inside Israel. Their threats will not benefit them. The retaliation to Samir assassinations will come.
The animosity between Hezbollah and Israel was reignited last week following the killing of one of Hezbollah's top commanders in Damascus, Samir Quntar, an assassination which was attributed to Israel. Now, according to the Kuwaiti daily Al-Qabas, international diplomats are engaged in intense efforts to convince Lebanese officials to prevent Hezbollah from launching a retaliatory attack against Israel. A European official quoted in the report said that foreign diplomats had warned the organization that Israel appeared to be well prepared to deal heavy blows to the group both in Lebanon and in Syria if it was to come under attack.
Joining me in studio this morning are I-24 News senior Middle East analyst Ali Wakad. Good morning to you. And Dr. Benedetta Berti, research fellow at the INSS, specializing in non-state organizations. Dr. Berti, non-state organizations. I'm looking at Hassan Nasrallah. A very long speech, as always.
Yes.
When we're listening to this, I mean, is this just rhetoric? Because at the end of the day, what can Hezbollah do to retaliate against Israel when it comes to that assassination of Quntar?
Right. Well, to one extent, of course, it's rhetoric. Of course, the Secretary General of Hezbollah needs to come out and publicly point finger towards Israel and say they did it, and we will get back at them. That's absolutely expected. But there's more. It's not just rhetoric. Hezbollah normally does follow up on his threats.
Right.
Hezbollah is an organization that is known to try to avenge every member. But what is interesting is when are they going to do it, how are they going to do it, and that's when we enter a very big speculation.
But how involved are they in Syria? Because at the end of the day, the argument that we've been hearing over the course of the last several years, I would say, is that Hezbollah is too busy at this point. Is that the case?
Well, Hezbollah is very busy. Let's say that they have between 3,000 and 5,000 people on the ground in Syria. That is a big number of people. It doesn't represent even half of the organization's fighters. It's probably one-fourth or something like that. But it is a sustained military effort. It is a in-depth military effort. I don't think they would be very happy to open a second front, meaning an all-out conventional war with Israel. But between an all-out conventional war and doing nothing, well, there's a very big gray space of things that can be done, like ad hoc one-off operation, like, for example, the launching of a couple of rockets, for example, or even more expected from an organization like Hezbollah that would be trying to strike Israeli targets abroad, because what happens abroad does not affect the war equation. So all these possibilities are definitely being, I imagine, discussed by the organization and by Nasrallah.
By Nasrallah. Listening to Nasrallah, Ali Waked with us in studio as well. As Benedetta Berti, as Dr. Berti said, he has to come out. He has to say something. I'm wondering if this is also just coming as a play right now because of the Syrian situation, because of the negotiations going, or the attempted negotiations to resolve something out there.
Yeah, I don't think that the negotiations in Syria will resolve something, not in the very next future, because of the simple fact that the main actors on the ground in the rebel sides, the Islamic State and the Al-Nusra Front, are not included in this plan, in these negotiations. But I want to mention one thing, Yael. Nasrallah of a week before and Nasrallah of yesterday afternoon was very much confident than he was a week ago, and this is simply due to the fact that Zahran Aloush, a main actor in the Syrian opposition, was assassinated a couple of days after Samir Quntar, and the Hezbollah Iran-Syria camp could present some achievement in this fight. And of course, it affected morally Nasrallah, his way of speech. The gesture of his body was totally different than it was a week before. I want to add to what Dr. Benedetta said, that there is also Israel, inside Israel, there is also, of course, the West Bank. Hezbollah is investing very big efforts in the West Bank to try to move this intifada, this wave, from being only popular wave, Molotov cocktails, stabbings, etc., to, I wouldn't say something more organized, but to firearms. And recently, the Israeli security services had dismantled some cells, had arrested some former militants, especially of the Al-Aqsa Martyr Brigades, the military wing of Fatah, who admitted receiving money from Hezbollah including the security services of the Palestinian Authority, arrested some militants who admitted that they received money from Hezbollah in order to orchestrate, to launch attacks against Israel. And in between the lines, we could read that Nasrallah linked himself to the Syrian-Iranian effort to open a new front. When and how, we don't know, in the Golan Heights. Until now, it looked like a separate effort of some parts of the Syrian security services, in which Samir Quntar was part of this equation. Yes, but until this speech, I would say that very few intelligence reports in Israel, some modest media reports, mention what we in the last years called the popular resistance committees in Syria, based on Syrian citizens and Druze from the Israeli part of the Golan Heights, that will create and will organize this insurrection, this uprising, or this resistance against the Israeli presence. Nasrallah said, until now, the Israelis considered their Golan as being a very quiet front. And we can understand that it will not last longer, this silence in this part of the Golan.
In this part of the Golan. And it's not just Nasrallah, Hassan Nasrallah, who was giving out these the rhetoric of threats over the course of the weekend. ISIS released a new audio message on Saturday, purportedly from its leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, mocking the U.S. to begin with for not putting combat boots on the ground and criticizing the recently declared Saudi-led Islamic military coalition against terrorism, and of course also pinpointing Israel. Let's have a listen to what al-Baghdadi, that's the known leader of ISIS, had to say over the weekend.
We have not forgotten Palestine and never do. You should know that, Jews. Very soon you will hear the sounds of our forces that will rally around you. Your account will come, and you will not enjoy, and even not for a moment, in Palestine, and it will never be a home for you, but as a tomb. God united you in Palestine to let you be killed by the Muslims.
Let's go first straight to London, where we're joined on the phone by political advisor and executive director of the Human Security Center, Julie Linares. Julie, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. When we're listening, I'm assuming that as part of your job, as part of your work, that monitoring what ISIS says or the threats that come out over the course from the Islamic State, goes without saying. When we're listening to them, though, when a threat like that comes over the weekend from Mohammed Bakr al-Baghdadi, is that something, I don't want to say not taken seriously, but is there a specific, in your mind, is there a specific timing for this rhetoric of threat to come out over the weekend from al-Baghdadi?
Well, I think his statement is a sign that ISIS is under intense pressure, more than a sign that, of actual intent. They are not going to attack Israel. Al-Baghdadi knows just as much as everyone else that they do not have the capabilities to do that. So the question is, why did he say what he said? And for that, we have to look at the context. We have to look at the reality on the ground. And the truth is that ISIS is on the defensive, both in Syria and Iraq. They've lost significant territory recently, not just any territory, but significant, strategically important territory. Just yesterday, the Iraqi army took Ramadi from ISIS, and that was another serious setback in a row of setbacks. Recently, the Kurds took Sinjar. Just the other day, the Kurds and the Arab forces in Syria took a strategic position close to Raqqa. We do know that the offensive on Mosul is in the planning. So they are fighting on every single front, and right now they're not doing a good job. So what al-Baghdadi was trying to do really was to deflect from bad news at home.
To deflect attention in that respect. Dr. Birdie, when we're listening to al-Baghdadi and ISIS on the ground, as Julie Linares just said, indeed we're reading reports of substantial gains. Mm-hmm. Can we take that at face value? And I'm sorry for being, I'm not optimistic, but a little bit, questioning, because we've seen these battles against ISIS in the Iraqi land over the course of the last 2 years. They're pushed back, then they take it again. But Ramadi's a big deal, right?
Well, let's just say I think there is some truth to the fact that in the past few weeks we have seen more substantial losses, but I don't think this is over. I don't think this is enough to say, the Islamic State has been defeated. I think it's certainly true that they are in some parts of their territory on the defensive. It's true to many extent that in the past year they've gone into consolidation mode. But I would also urge us to look at Syria and Iraq as, of course, the Islamic State project, right. But that's not the totality of the Islamic State project anymore. If we want to look at where the Islamic State is going, where they're thinking, then we need to look at Libya. We need to look at Sinai. We need to look at all the different provinces. And if you look at it in this more global way, then it's hard to say that they're losing, because to some extent Libya has been one of the new hotspots, and there is a very fluid dynamic over there. So let's say that in Iraq there have been some interesting losses. In Syria, I would say also, but to a lesser extent. At the same time, in Syria, the Islamic State is also gaining. So what they're losing, they're also gaining. And
when we're listening to this, these threats against Israel, it's something that we can take as face value as more ISIS propaganda, although nobody should be, too calm. But
well, It is in their name, it is in their project. Now they call themselves the Islamic State, but it's the Islamic State region of Iraq and Sham, the Levant.
Right.
The Levant includes Jordan, the Levant includes Palestine, the Levant includes Israel, includes Lebanon. So they had never made a mystery about their territorial ambitions and that they would include Israel, Palestine. So in that sense, this is not a revelation. This is just they're saying what was in their name.
What was in their name, and watch out, we're coming, or we're already here.
At the same time, the timing is interesting. But I think we all focus, of course, on the threat against Israel because it's something we hear somewhat less. But let's not forget a good portion of the speech was dedicated to the well-known mocking of the United States presence, and then Saudi Arabia, which has become a
huge thing. I mean, I think that was the main bulk that interested.
The two speeches of Nasrallah, he focused on Palestine, the link between Quntar and Palestine, the link between the Lebanese resistance and Palestine, and same did al-Baghdadi. When you are on the defensive, when you are under pressure, Palestine is something very sexy that can sell to the listeners and to the recruits. But I want to say, technically, it's not something impossible that the Islamic State could organize a cell. For example, inside Israel, we are hearing about more and more cells being dismantled in the Negev
by the Bedouin community,
or a cell in the West Bank that will carry out an attack in Israel under the name of the Islamic State. I'm not seeing a whole organization now raising up in the even not in the Gaza Strip, where they are having more and more members of the Islamic Jihad, and especially of the Al-Qassam brigades of the Hamas military wing, passing to the Islamic State brigade because they feel more attracted by this new branch and to that ideology. We know that hundreds of militants of the Hamas are now fighting in the land of the Caliphate in Raqqa and in Mosul. Almost every week, families in the Gaza Strip are receiving information from friends of their sons that they were killed in the fights of the Islamic State in Iraq and in Syria. So I don't see it as an impossible phenomenon to see an attack here or there of the Islamic State inside Israel or from the West Bank or from the Gaza Strip against Israeli targets.
Which I'm assuming is intelligence and security services in Israel aren't seeing that as impossible as well. I want to thank you both for being with me this morning as we move along.